Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. In the Hong Kong Legislative Council election held Sunday, it is reported that the pre-establishment camp won 41 out of 70 seats, similar to the proportion in the last LegCo election. What's notable is that within the opposition camp, localist hopefuls won 6 seats. Nathan Law, 23, who was a member of the Hong Kong Federation of Students during the Occupy Central movement, became the youngest lawmaker. Localists don't expressly advocate Hong Kong independence. Votes are mostly from young people who are anxious about jobs and houses and echo the localists to vent discontent with their reality. They are not necessarily pro-independence. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, Tsai Ing-wen has seen her popularity plummet, and her critics have taken to the streets in protest. On September the 3rd, more than 150,000 protested because of her refusal to abide by the 1992 consensus, which agrees that the mainland and Taiwan are part of one nation, as they believe this is responsible for a dramatic fall in the tourists from the mainland. So how much support does Tsai Ing-wen still have for her policies? What aspects of Taiwan's economy are suffering the most from these unsteady cross-strait ties? And what is Beijing's new strategy in handling both Hong Kong and Taiwan? Is there indeed any link between the two? To answer these questions, we are joined in the studio by Tao Wen-zhao and Zhong Hou-tao. Both are from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And we shall also do a satellite cross with Xie Chen-huang from Tamkang University in Taiwan. Welcome to our discussion here in Beijing studio. Now, the legislative election in Hong Kong generated a lot of headlines around the world, particularly in the overseas countries. Now, this arrangement, which was first introduced by the last governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, aroused a lot of debates as to whether the opposition would have majority to veto any major constitutional change. This is very sensational, of course, for the mainland. What do you think of the consequences?
Well, we know that under British rule, Hong Kong used to be the so-called administrative leading system. The British governor is the highest chief of the Hong Kong, and under that chief, there's a legislative body. So legislative body was subject to the British governor. But as you just said, during the Chris Patten's tenure, he made a so-called political reform, actually, and he wants to introduce so-called three-power
check and balance.
Yeah, check and balance system to Hong Kong. But of course, we do not recognize that, because when the agreement between China and Britain was signed, we also emphasized that Hong Kong will remain to be the administrative leading system. It's not checks and balance. So right now, as you said, things are changing in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong governor's authority is weakened, I think, and the legislative body is strengthened. So this is a very delicate situation.
Now, Hou-tao, some of the localists won seats in the lawmaking body, and that includes, of course, one youngest member of the local parliament, so to speak. And he vows to push for independence or a change of sovereignty status in 10 to 20 years. Is that a coded way of pushing for independence?
I don't think that is a coded way for the pro-independence. I think those who are voting or who were voting for this guy named Luo Guanzhong, just for their sympathy to this guy. And personally, I think that Luo Guanzhong did not set a good example for young students in Hong Kong, since he's very young, and actually he just graduated from university, and for those young students, maybe that means if they just protest in street, they could have a good chance to win in legislation. Maybe I don't think that is really a good model for the young generation.
I wonder, both of you have followed very closely the elections. About the makeup of the new LegCo, Do you think China has good reasons to be worried about the composition? Because we see a slight rise in favor of those pro-democracy and perhaps potentially pro-secession people. Yeah.
Certainly there's some worry in the mainland about this election and about Hong Kong's future. But we have to understand Hong Kong is a very diversified place. It's not Beijing, it's not Shanghai. There's all kinds of different opinions and all kinds of different orientations and political thinkings. But of course, those people like those young students are too naive. They believe that democracy is the best thing. They believe that Hong Kong needs democracy more than anything else.
Excuse me, Tao, are they truly worried about democracy or the basic issues of bread and butter, housing conditions, or the jobs themselves? Since, like very much what we said about the graduates of university studies in mainland, the moment you graduate, you lose a job because we don't have such a big job market to live up to the expectations of those new graduates.
They believe that if there's democracy, there will be everything. So I said, I believe that those people are too naive. If they really want to know democracy, they have to study, experience democracy abroad. For instance, in the United States. The United States is generally regarded as the most mature democracy in the world. But now, what's happening there? Well, the general election is going on, and people all think that is a chaotic situation in the United States. So if in Hong Kong people do so-called self-determination, as Nathan Law suggests, then I think the things will be much more chaotic than in the United States today.
Dr. Zhong, do you think what Nathan Law calls for is a tip of the huge iceberg in terms of holding a referendum? Because quite a few years back, when Taiwanese authorities called for referendum to push for independence, the mainland said, well, you got to watch your language. The referendum itself would amount to a declaration of independence and also a declaration of a war. So do you think mainland would have zero tolerance for any such serious referendum which is likely to shape the future of Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think the Chinese mainland will take its zero tolerance for this kind of the so-called referendum, since it is breaking the law, especially the basic law. And another point is that those who are voting for this localist does not mean they support their political ideas. They just may be showing their sympathy. Actually, those who are voting them does not support the so-called pro-independence ideas, I think. So it is very hard for those localists to take this kind of referendum. They could not get enough support from the public.
Well, the basic law banned those who advocate independence from getting involved in the race. That's apparent, that's for sure. And therefore, don't you think people like Jason Law was very clever and has acquired some sophistication by saying, I don't openly call for independence, I only call for autonomy. But that reminds me of what happened following the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The high autonomy of Kurds in northern Iraq, that's almost a kind of manifestation of independence, right?
Well, I think under the basic law of Hong Kong Special Administrative Zone region, Hong Kong does enjoy a high degree of autonomy. And Hong Kong today does enjoy its autonomy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what Nathan Law suggests, so-called autonomy or self-determination, I think he just does not need a basic law. It just does not need the constitution.
Are you talking about its defiance against central authority?
Exactly. He defies central authority. But we think and we insist that the authority of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region is given by the central government according to the constitution and according to the basic law.
Thank you very much. You are watching Dialogue with Mr. Tao Wen-Zhao and Mr. Zhongho Tao. We are discussing the impact of the latest legislative election in Hong Kong that was held last Sunday. When we come back, we'll discuss latest development in Taiwan. Stay with us, please.
Peace once more reigns in Taipei after a massive series of protests. But it's only a moment of tranquility before a new round of the storm. Tour business workers are plotting another huge demonstration for next Monday, which is expected to be joined by thousands of people. The industry has been facing a slump in the past few months that's largely due to the drastic decline of Chinese mainland tour groups. 3 months after Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen took office, the number of mainland visitors, which accounted for about 40% of the total tourist inflow last year, has fallen unprecedentedly more than 22% year on year. The protest organisers say the decline is largely due to Tsai's vague stance on the One China policy, which has antagonised the mainland. Regular high-level cross-strait communications have been suspended, which had just been strengthened by Tsai's predecessor, Ma Ying-jeou. 3 months into office, Tsai's new administration has seen a free fall in its popularity, from around 70% to only 41%. Both domestic and foreign pressures are stacking up. US President Barack Obama reaffirmed the US stance of not supporting Taiwan independence during his stay in Hangzhou. And observers warn the future of the island will be overshadowed if the current administration continues to take a hesitant stance on its One China policy, which Beijing has reiterated is the basis of all negotiations.
Mr. Tan, Mr. Zhong, are you surprised about the free fall in approval rating for Madam Tsai Ing-wen, the newly elected leader in Taiwan? And how do you assess generally her performance in the first 100 days after taking office?
Well, her performance is not that good, you know. First of all, of course, the economic performance. We know that the background, the general situation of the world is not that good. But Tsai does not make her efforts to save Taiwan's economy, and especially Taiwan, because it depends a lot on the cross-strait relations, Taiwan's investment in mainland and the cross-strait trade, etc. So if Tsai deteriorates the political relations between the two sides, then Taiwan's economy cannot go up. Taiwan still must suffer.
Your take?
I'm a little bit surprised for his declining approving rate. You know, just before May 20, before she taking her position, people in Taiwan take high expectation for her, but now she failed to meet those expectations. I think the most important reason for her failure is her policy is ranging from the domestic policy to a cross-strait policy and even the foreign policies, I think.
Then let's look at the southbound economic policy. She vows to divert the alleged excessive dependence on the mainland economy to ASEAN and South Asia. Do you think she will succeed?
I doubt very much. You know, even Li Denghui advocated for southbound policy at that time, but Li Denghui did not succeed. And one fact is very clear. Now, the mainland China is the biggest trade partner for all the countries surrounding China. From North Korea, Japan, then of course Taiwan and Hong Kong, and then ASEAN, all 10 countries of ASEAN, and also Australia and New Zealand. So even the ASEAN countries depends on economic relations, interdependence with mainland China. How can Taiwan divert its efforts to ASEAN instead to develop relations with mainland?
So far, what do you think of the feedback, if any, from ASEAN and South Asia towards what Madam Tsai Ing-wen calls proactive efforts to seek their help?
That's really a good question. According to my observation, those countries, including ASEAN countries and South Asia countries, are also including Australia and New Zealand. They are not so interested about Tsai Ing-wen's so-called southbound policy.
But Tsai Ing-wen says Taiwan is ready to join the TPP, which may help the integration of Taiwan with the rest of the Commonwealth or this economic bloc that the American government tries to establish. I mean, it's a trade regime.
Yeah, that's almost impossible. TPP is not passed even in the United States, so the future for TPP is quite obvious, is not so bright. As for Taiwan, if the United States could really want to help Taiwan, then it could help Taiwan to join in the first round of discussion, not in the second round. So I think United States would not sincerely help Taiwan in joining TPP.
Thank you very much. Let me cross over to Mr. Xie Cheng-Huang from Tamkang University in Taiwan for his comments on the economic performance of the Tsai Ing-wen administration in Taiwan. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Yes, go ahead with your comments.
Yeah, I think this is still very early in the Tsai Ing-wen administration. We have seen some difficulties in the first 100 days, but I think there are more programs that will be carrying out, and so I think we will give a benefit of doubt for this new administration.
Yes, indeed, there will be a painful period for transition from the previous KMT government to the DPP government in terms of how to improve and fine-tune the economic policies. However, what's imminent and urgent for the DPP government is the plummeting of the approval rating for Madam Tsai Ing-wen. Without the support of the power base like those of up to 70% of the electorate, then domestically it could be a major problem. Don't you think so?
Of course, for any new leadership, the first 100 days with such a dip of the approval rating is an alarm to the new administration. And I think the first priority is still get the economy back on track. And also, we need to get the people's priority first, which means to increase the national revenue and also to make people feel that there is a high hope that in the near future that the economy can get better than before.
150,000 people took to the street in protest against the economic policies, and more are coming to protest against the tourism policy because there is a sharp decline in the number of tourists from the mainland, and therefore there are good reasons for people to voice grievances about, for example, the reluctance by Tsai Ing-wen to accept the 1992 consensus, and that has seriously eroded the political foundation for the two sides of the Taiwan Strait to engage in serious dialogue about either the political future, political process, or economic integration. What do you think of the massive street protests and their impact?
I think there is a difference between the protests that we have seen on September the 3rd, which were basically the retirees or the veterans of the public servant and military service. I would call that a rally to clear their names and to protect their honor. For the tourist group, which will get on street next Monday, that's more like a protest because of the lack of business in the tourism in the past 2-3 months. So I think that we need to differentiate these two. September the 3rd is more like a rally to clear their name, to protect their honor, and they did not want to see their pension reform would damage their future life and retire life.
How did Tsai Ing-wen respond to the public anger?
I think she wanted to, as much as possible, to get the economic reform undergoing. But I think it is difficult for her to push everything forward at the same time. Just like 10 fingers playing the piano is not an easy job.
One more question for you, Mr. Huang. The mainland is clearly aware of Tsai Ing-wen's reluctance to accept the 1992 consensus, namely about the One China principle, and therefore we say clearly that the political foundation is being weakened. And we not only resumed diplomatic relations with Gambia, a small country in Africa, but the number of tourists from mainland declines, obviously as a result of the current tensions across the Taiwan Strait over the One China principle. Do you think the mainland, if the mainland were to take more measures to, to warn Tsai Ing-wen about the issue of One China, then that would be a serious, if not a devastating blow to the already faltering economy in Taiwan?
I think Dr. Tsai is very clear that mainland China can take more measures and make Taiwan people feel that without a 92 consensus there will be significant consequences. But I would have to say that Dr. Tsai is the best person probably understand the sensitivities of the political relationship across the Taiwan Strait and also the pressures from the international community. So I think still she has several miles to go, and but I think she has been very careful and very prudent when looking at the future relationship across the Taiwan Strait.
Thank you very much. I will get back to you if time allows. Now, a question for the two guests in Beijing studio. Tian Huangmao has recently been appointed by Tsai Ing-wen to head the Streets Exchange Foundation. What do you know about him, first of all? Second, what message does Tsai appear to be sending with her appointment of Tian?
Tian Hongmao actually has no party affiliation. He neither from KMT nor from DPP. But of course, he supports some DPP's doctrine. That's why he served as the first minister in charge of foreign affairs under Chen Shui-bian. Yeah. And in comparison with those radical independence advocates, Tian Hongmao seems a bit more moderate. So that's why Tian Hongmao is acceptable to different factions within the DPP.
Pretty clear, Mr. Tao. But Dr. Zhong, Mr. Tian calls for a serious engagement of dialogue with the mainland, trying to seek an alternative to the One China principle, namely the 1992 consensus. But that seems to be a mission impossible. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with your idea. That's almost a mission impossible. Since if the Taiwan want to set another alternative consensus with Chinese mainland, then should be based on One China principle. But it's quite hard for them to find another one aside from the 1992 consensus. So as for your another question, that is what Tsai Ing-wen saying as taking Tian Hongmao as the safe chairman. I think she is returning or embracing the deep green camp. And another message she's sending that, Tian Hongmao once served as the so-called the foreign minister in Chen Shui-bian administration. That means Tsai Ing-wen want to take the cross-strait relationship, want to be just take it as a kind of foreign relationship. That actually is challenging the Chinese mainland.
Okay, that's a pretty sharp comment on the appointment of Tian as the head of the Exchange Foundation. Now, let me go back to Mr. Huang for his comments on the appointment. Does it mean that Tsai Ing-wen goes back to the deep green position about the cross-strait relations by appointing Mr. Tian as head of CEF. Mr. Huang.
On the contrary, I have comment on Taiwan newspaper in saying that Tsai Ing-wen has been very brave to appoint Dr. Tian Hongmao, because she will definitely face opposition from within the DPP and the dark green community. I think there are many people in the DPP and the senior politicians on the green side wanted the job, but she is taking the risk, but still appoint a person, Dr. Tian Hongmao, without party affiliation. I think from Taiwan's perspective, she is trying very hard to not to go to the dark green side, but to maintain a possibility in the future to resume dialogue. As for the consensus or the terminology, I think there will be more to come. There is a gradual progress in the future.
Well, let's take a look at the KMT, which recently wrote an article like the pursuit of a peace process into its party charter. What does that mean?
Well, I think that is a very big event.
First of all, what do you mean by peace process?
Peace process, of course, it's I think peaceful development across the strait, and if we go back to the consensus between Lian Zhan and President Hu Jintao, there's the 5 big consensus, and one is to end the war state across the strait by peace agreement. So peace process, I think, should be the continuation of that kind of a consensus between KMT and the CPP. So I think this is a big thing, and this means that the KMT will stick to that peace process, stick to that consensus between the two parties.
Dr. Zhong, are you optimistic about applying finishing touches to what we call war status across the Taiwan Strait? Because since 1949, when the People's Republic of China was founded, KMT government fled to the mainland and sought shelter in the island of Taiwan. But in theory, the two sides are still at war. Do you think this peace process of signing a peace agreement is likely by any way?
Personally, I hope the two sides could sign this kind of peace agreement to end this kind of state of war. But in reality, I'm not so optimistic, since the DPP is the ruling party in Taiwan. It's quite hard for the two sides to communicate with each other, to take dialogue, especially political dialogue. If there is no political dialogue, it's very impossible for them to sign a new agreement. As for peace treaty for KMT, I think it's really just as Professor Tao said, it's really a good sign, especially for the communication between KMT and CPC. I hope these two parties could continue their communication in November.
Do you think that there is still the momentum in the party-to-party relationship between KMT and the CPC following the landmark summit meeting, quote-unquote, between Ma Ying-jeou, the former leader of Taiwan, and Mr. Xi Jinping in Singapore? Do you think Hung Xiu-zhu, the newly elected chairwoman of KMT, the opposition party, will follow the momentum and continue this landmark meeting somewhere, perhaps like in Singapore?
Yes, I think so. But the problem is Hung Xiu-zhu is a preliminary, is a temporary chairman of KMT.
Yeah.
So just 1 year after she took office, maybe there will be another chairman of KMT, permanent chairman of KMT. KMT will elect another one. So that's the problem. Who will be the chairman of KMT?
So there's a lot of uncertainty and unpredictability across the Taiwan Strait. With that, we come to the end of the second part of our dialogue on the latest situation in Taiwan, another territory on the Taiwan Strait. I'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.